Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Language Lounge. My name is Michelle Ola, and today I have Trudy Anderson here with me. And Trudy is the NECTFL, the Northeast Region Teacher of the Year. Congratulations. That's very exciting. And we're going to kind of talk about some things that's on your mind, right, Trudy, of just some things that are coming up in this context of teaching. And I think I talk to teachers a lot, and I think it is different right now. There's a lot going on that maybe hasn't been in the forefront in the past. And I know that kind of touches on some things that you're thinking about. So why don't you first just give us a little introduction to who you are, and then we'll kind of hop into the subject.
Okay, so as Michelle said, I'm Trudy Anderson. I'm a Spanish teacher in New Haven Public Schools in Connecticut, and I really love teaching middle school. I know a lot of people think
Yay.
that's really strange. I really do like middle school. And I'm originally from Jamaica, where I started learning Spanish and French, and learning languages has opened up such a huge world to me for friendships and travel and career. And it's been an interesting, fun-filled year, but also a year of a lot of work, but it's been really nice.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. So we were talking about this year in particular and some things that you're thinking about, and maybe some challenges that you're encountering that maybe you didn't in the past. So why don't you just kind of hop right in and talk about some of that's on your mind?
Okay. Well, this year, I think for me, seems like it's harder than the other years of the pandemic. And one of the things I thought about was wondering why it felt so hard to me. And I
Mhm.
realized that during the pandemic, we, abruptly shut down school, and I was out of school for a full year. So we had to learn how to
Yeah.
teach online and learn all the technology things to get product out to the students. And so that was almost like a fight reflex, learning how to do all
Yeah.
these things. And then we came back into school and we had to learn how to be in school. And so that's still a survival thing. My principal called it survival. We were learning how to survive in
Yeah.
school. And then this year is supposed to be the kind of normal year where you feel like your emotions and your fight or flight instincts are starting to lower. And it just makes you kind of I don't know if tired is, but it
Yeah.
just takes a lot more energy and effort to do things. And the students are very different than they were before, learning how to get along with each other, how to talk to each other
Mhm.
again, how to realize that school's for real. You're going to be doing this. So it's just been, I think this year has taken a lot more effort and energy on many teachers' parts to do the work that needs to get done, and realizing, well, even if I'm feeling this way, what are the things that I know are really good and best practices to do, and making sure that you do those things despite how you might be feeling,
Yeah.
being
And it's
back in
not
the
easy, is it?
normal
I know.
environment. No, it's not. But I think
Yeah.
I have to remind myself that this is the right thing to do. So keep doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see a lot on, but just personal friends and social media. And I think there was that expectation that, oh, well, this year should be normal, right? And just putting
Right.
that label on it. And then people just asking themselves, like, why isn't it? Right? Why are things
Mhm.
still so hard? Right. And I think like you're right, there's a lot of I think about the pandemic, and that was the greatest disruptor
Me too.
probably
That's true.
ever, right? I can't think of, like everywhere, everyone was affected in some ways,
Mm.
right? And it's hard to just bounce back and go back to the way things were, right? And especially
And we have to admit
students.
that it won't. We
Right.
really do have to admit that it's never going to go back to the way it was. So how do we adjust to what we're
Yeah.
seeing?
Yeah. And so what are some things that you're seeing that are different, that you're really having to like rethink how you've done things in the past, maybe either, with your students or in your school climate, or, nationally, or whatever you're kind of thinking, what are some resets you've had to do?
So I'll start with my students. I think for the past, well, since we've been out, I have not given a normal test
Mm-hmm.
to students. I do not give homework
Mm-hmm.
anymore because, and I'm saying not that kids never have things to do at home. They have options of things that they could do, but I'm not offering formal homework. I'm trying to get everything done in class because they have zero interest in doing, except for one kid who keeps asking me for homework. Literally, I have one child who says I need something to do. But
Oh, they're going to be a teacher
they
someday, right?
know, but they are not interested in doing that. And I think that's a battle I don't have to fight if I make sure that whatever I'm doing in the 70 minutes that I have them each class is worthwhile. I still
Yeah.
think that they're progressing. So I've had to make that switch off where they're doing performance tasks. And I think that's even more valuable than doing the formal testing that I used to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's for sure very different. I think the activities that I do tend to be shorter in duration
Mm-hmm.
because some of their attention spans aren't as long. So switching the activities quicker in class has been helpful for me. Let's see what else I do differently. And I think I'm asking them a lot more what it is that they'd like to do. So for example, we don't use textbooks in New Haven,
Mm-hmm.
but we do have themes and we have vocabulary that we think every child should know based on the units that we're working on. But we also do ask kids for what their interests are. And so those are because we know kids are going to learn the vocabulary that means something to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so previewing with them, so we're going to be talking about this. Well, which words would you want to know? And making sure that I'm incorporating those into the lessons. And I always give the story of I hate cooking. I would never put cooking as a list of my likes.
Like that you want, right? Right.
And kids kept asking about cooking and baking. So that became one of the, and so those were the words they learned. So making sure that they're invested in what they learn also has been something that's had changed, partially driven because we're not using set textbooks anymore, but also because if they're more interested in what they're going to do, then more likely they'll do it. So my classroom has changed a little bit where that's concerned. I think um, learning to advocate for my program has also changed. Just
Yeah.
making sure that my program will survive with everything else that's going on with people talking about test scores and that I'm at the table having a discussion when they think about, well, what classes are going to be offered and what will I be teaching and who will be able to take my classes.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? Because you do see, like you said, the information about, the lower test scores and that students aren't meeting these expectations. And I think we can all kind of see some stuff coming
Mhm.
that whether it's reducing the number of languages that are taught in your school or your district. We've been, there's always been programs that have languages that are more susceptible sometimes. Like in Florida here, Spanish isn't going to go anywhere, but
Mhm.
French or German or Latin.
Mhm.
And when all languages are important and valuable, right? So it's,
Yes.
keeping those. So whether it's something like that or, a specific circumstance, I think we are going to have to advocate more for ourselves and our programs. How do you, first of all, how did you get a seat at the table? I'd love to hear, like, how do you feel like you were able to get yourself in that conversation where
Mhm.
these kind of things might be being happening? And what advice do you have for teachers that do want to make sure that people understand the value of what we do?
Well, first, I'm going to say that I have the world's best supervisor who is
Oh.
a great advocate for world languages, Jessica Haxian. She's
Oh,
actually
yes, yes.
she's now the past president, was the president. So she has been really instrumental in languages have always been important in New Haven. I have to say that, but I think it's been increased since she's been there, that she's always in the mix of things that they're talking about on the
Yeah.
macro level downtown and getting the funding that we need. And I think in a lot of ways we're saving them money because we're not using textbooks. The teachers are creating the materials.
Right.
And, we're producing, I think we might be the largest world language department in Connecticut. And so I think that's really good when you have support from the top.
Yeah.
And that kind of helps drive the direction of what will happen in your city or your town. With that being said, I've been in my school. This is my 31st year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had the length of time to help grow the program, and parents kind of trust what's there. So that's kind of helpful that I've been the time that I've been there. I think being at the table, partially it's because you have to say something. You can't just accept everything that somebody says and just say nothing can be done about
Mm-hmm.
it. And I think we have to be careful how we do things. Jessica always says, make sure that you are an indispensable part of your school team, and not always just say, world languages, I'm kind of separate. That you should be a part of the school team, whether it's the school planning things, or we have a school planning management team that I'm on, or you're the data leadership team, or, speaking up in your grade level
Yeah.
meetings, so that you're part of everything that's going on there. I think that's always valuable because they'll be willing to listen to you
Mm-hmm.
because you're doing other things and not being so separate. Because especially for many teachers who I'm the only world language teacher in my school, not to separate yourself, just to be really visible. But I'm going to highlight two incidents that happened recently for me. At the end of last school year, they were starting to offer, students were starting to sign up for classes, and Spanish was going to be considered to be a special, which I don't particularly agree with. I think it's a core subject, and students could choose what they wanted to do. And it's an academic subject, and they're going to have to do extra work
Yeah.
that they would not necessarily have to do in some of the specials. And don't get me wrong, I agree the arts are important. That's the outlet for so many kids. But there are different types of specials. And there was one that was going to be very attractive to my students. And I knew, this is going to be an issue. And one of my really lovely students, he's such a, there are students who just get it. Like, you don't really have to teach them certain things. They listen to you, they're in class, and they can just speak or write
Yeah.
really well. And he said to me, I'm not going to take your Spanish 2 next year because I'm going to do this particular class. I
It
just
broke your
was
heart.
like, it did break my heart. I was
Right.
unhappy. I said, oh no, you can't do this. And so we had to, when I had my classes, I started talking to them about why it's important to learn a second language. Said, look at what you were able to do when you walked in here 2 years ago. Look at what you can do now. Here's what's out there for you in the future, for travel, for work,
Mm-hmm.
for college, and seal of biliteracy, all these things you could do if you keep studying a language. And you don't want that 1 year gap between studying a language and then starting over in high school. You need to do the continuum. So we did talk about that quite a bit in class, and talked about, what we do in here. I try to make it fun, but I do think it's still work, but it's not work that's going to be detrimental to you. And you've seen what it's been like for the past 2 years. So I really do think you should do that. And I got a lot of them to sign up for the class again. But there are some holdouts because they felt like they really needed to do a special. So I called their parents
Mm-hmm.
and had a conversation about why they should take this class. And luckily, I might have taught their parents years ago.
Yes.
I might have taught an older sibling. And just, and I do believe in building a community within your students and within your parents, because I am a big believer in making the good phone calls. So if the child has done something wonderful in class that you noticed and you really appreciate, then call the parents and let them know that your child did this. And I had made phone calls to this
Mm-hmm.
boy's parents. And so when I called and said, I would really hate to lose him because he is so good at these things, and I've spoken to you about them before. And she agreed with me. And several parents agreed with me, but they still felt that their child needed to take a special. And so
Mm-hmm.
they called the principal and really spoke up about why they thought their kids should have Spanish too, and
And mm-hmm.
also take a special. And they did some workaround, and everything didn't work out perfectly with the scheduling because I had to make some concessions also where that was concerned. But I am really thrilled that I had those students come back to my class, and I lost maybe 10 students. And the funny thing is that in the fall, when school started, I got 4 of them back. So
Ah,
it's a matter of being, advocacy is not only calling your governor or
yeah.
speaking to, your superintendent. I think it can be a local thing to your classroom, to your school, to make sure people understand why this is important for them to do, and that learning a language is as important as math, as important as language arts, and the benefits. Like, we need to go back and read. I had to go back and read about why it's so important for people to learn a second language. What are the benefits, to remind myself about those things, and to remind the people that I'm talking to about why these students should be there.
I
So
love that
these
because
are
I
things
was
I
just
can
gonna
think
say
about.
that actually, like, that idea of having an elevator speech, right? Having your, kind of most important reasons, because we know, like, internally in our hearts, we know where, why it's important, and it was important to us, and the impact it makes. But articulating that is not
Mhm,
always easy, right?
mhm,
And so I love that you said, I had to go back and look at, like, some of that research and have
mhm,
some of those bullet points so that you can not just say, well, I love this kid and he's really good at this, but you can say it's going to benefit him or
mhm,
her. It's going to make a difference in not only his life but in the community, right? And so
mhm.
I love that. I think having that elevator speech as a teacher is a valuable, tool in our advocacy, toolbox. I think that's great.
And we can't rest. I learned from that incident, another one, that I can't just rest on my laurels to say, I've
Yeah.
been, as somebody told me last week, you've been here forever, Mrs. Anderson, which is true. It
Like, is
seems like
that
I've
a
been here forever.
compliment, or was that, like, what
She
was
was saying
that?
it in the nicest way, but we were in this meeting and she told me 3 times, and especially since that day I had dealt with the father of one of the children I'm teaching right now, and I taught the father.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I've been there forever. I understand that, but I can't rest on my
Yeah.
laurels and think that it's always going to be the same way. People understand how things are, but always making sure that I'm ready to say, here's what the research says.
Mhm.
You want to take a look at this. I'm being willing to work around things with other people too, because as I said earlier, not everything worked out perfectly in my schedule because I went and talked about this. But if I'm willing to say these kids need to take Spanish, then I should be willing to be a little bit inconvenienced also
Mhm.
and teach them because I want them to take that language. And so there's some give and take there when you're working through administration, because every class has value,
Mhm.
so you're going to have to be willing to give and take.
I think that's a really powerful story, because I think no matter what circumstance teachers are in out there, they can relate to that in some way, both that advocacy piece, but also kind of, you have to market yourself. You have to, put something into that relationship, like bank account. You've been
Mhm.
depositing things into that bank account with your community and with your students and with your parents for a long time, and then it,
And with your
when something
administrator.
happens,
Yes. Yep.
yeah, when something happens, you might have to pull some of that out and kind of get some return on that. And I think that's really a powerful kind of a lesson that
And I've
you're.
been very fortunate to have a principal who's supportive of second language, and counselors who will listen when I call and say, I'd like to have a talk with you. And she'll say, uh-oh. But on the days that I say I would like to have a talk,
Yeah.
she knows that I don't bother you if there's nothing, unless
Right.
I think it's really important. And let's go hash this out.
That's great. And I think it's wonderful that you have those supportive, people above you, but you've probably been there longer than most of them. So there's also
Yes, longer than
you
them. It's been a
contribute
while.
to that, right? You've contributed to that by, you being an active member, like you said, of your school and of your community. So, I mean, I think that's also a tribute to you as well. So, and you said you had two stories. What was the other one that
The other
you
one
wanted to
was
share?
I got called and I was told that for my heritage language students would be removed from Spanish because of reading testing scores because it's testing season for the fall. And it was just really weird because I just had a talk with one of the students and told her it was wonderful that you're bilingual and all the things that are out there waiting for her because she's bilingual. And now I'm being told it was like 2 days later that she, along with three others, were going to be removed. And I thought about it and I said, yes, I want them to be very proficient in English, but I don't want to lose them as Spanish speakers. So, how I said I had to go back and take a look at how am I going to approach this? And so that's when I called and I said, I need to talk with you. And she said, oh, what's it this time? And I went downstairs and I said, all right, so I'm being told that they're going to be removed. And I said, I don't want them to be removed. I said, they're being successful in my class. Many of them are speakers of Spanish and not really great readers and writers of Spanish. And I think having them become more proficient in those areas is just going to set them up for their real world life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I talked to her about what the research says that they get better in English language skills. They're better, they're more likely to go to high school, graduate from high school, go to college, all these different things that the research said. And I said, this is what I would love for them to do. But I really do want them to get the reading intervention. Is there any way of switching periods, doing whatever it is that you need to do so that the kids could stay? And we talked for a while and brought in the other intervention teacher, and we hashed it out where they could stay with me and switch to another period for intervention. And the intervention teacher was lovely in the sense that she was willing to switch around what she was going to do in order to accommodate to these students because she understood why it would be good for them also. So, some of these things take time and you just can't expect that there won't be any give and take and
Mm-hmm.
somebody else might have to give like me she did. And that's why I think building a community and being visible in your school and being helpful in your school and having a say in your school is really important because people will be more willing to listen to you. And I've been finding that out, over the past 10 to 15 years about trying to be really visible and more involved with not only things that with a district, but definitely things in your own building, because that's what's going to direct what your life is like in the building.
Yeah. What I really loved about that is that you use the word and too. Like
Mhm,
two things can be true. They do
mhm,
need support in those core classes and those reading and literacy and math and all of that. And they need a second language, right? And so to
mhm.
approach it not as a either or win or lose, sort of thing and have that compromise. I think that is a really powerful, word to use when you're talking about this.
Yeah, and that had been the case in our school for a really long time, where in many schools, I've heard of students who either get a language or they get reading intervention. And with our principal, she always thought there should have been a way for them to get both.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there had to be a lot of workaround, especially this year. Like,
Yeah.
I think this year has caused a lot, the pandemic is a disruptor, and we've been learning how to react to some of the things that we're seeing and making changes while the school year is going on. So, me learning to I'm a very, I think I'm organized. I like things to know what's coming
Hmm.
and learning to be flexible where that's concerned and willing to give here and, like you said, take there if I need to. So
Hmm.
I'm thankful that we can do both. But I know in a lot of schools they don't do both. And I was reading this one research about how in underserved students, poor students, they actually do better when we give them a language.
Hmm.
And so many people don't even give them the language. A lot of students who have IEPs or
Yeah.
504s, they don't give them a language when they could even benefit from it. And I think the ways that we teach language, we teach with manipulatives, we teach with pictures, we do a lot of repetitions, all those things that they see on IEPs that
Yeah.
many kids need, we do it. Why don't they get the chance to at least try?
Yeah.
And those are the things that I wish we gave students the chance to try.
Yeah. I love what you just said because I was thinking about, how you become part of your school more. How do you, really make yourself, a part of that community, not just with your students and your parents, but like you said, that school community. And one of the things I always think is that some of the best teaching is happening in world language classrooms, just for the reasons you said, that we're breaking things down, we're chunking things out, like we have no choice, right? We're doing performance, we're having them do with the language, not just talk about the language, and all of the
Mhm.
things in a modern language classroom is just really good teaching, and things that you've mentioned about giving students some choice and some, engaging thematic units and all of that, and just showing off good teaching in general to others, that's happening in your classroom, I think is a powerful way to really be part of that school community and to advocate for you and your program and therefore your students.
You almost have to be like a salesperson in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
I and this idea did not come from me. It came from one of my students years ago. We were in Spanish too, and we were talking about our childhood. That was the unit we're working on, and we watched videos on different fairy tales, and we read fairy tales. And one student said, "Why don't we just make a play out of it?" And I said, "Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Let's do this." And I said, "Let's up that. Let's do it and perform it for the kindergartners." And it was the it was a lot of work, you know, because I had to have them write the script and make the
Yeah.
props, and it took maybe 6 weeks of putting it together. But to me, that was better than doing a test because I knew
Yeah.
they knew how to use the predator and the imperfect after belaboring it and writing, Little Red Riding Hood and the Three Little Bears. And
Yeah.
it was really great. But I was thinking, we performed it for the kindergartners and had them come up to the classroom and watch the play and listen to them laugh, and we showed it to other kids, and it was almost an ad
Yeah.
for your class. And it wasn't my idea, kids ideas, but
Yeah.
it was just, I loved that, and I kept doing it because the next group coming through could say, "Oh, I can do that."
That's
So
great.
that was one of the most fun things, and I thank her for giving me the idea of what to do with my class.
I think that's so true. And when I think of advocacy, I often think of sales and marketing. That those two, like marketing your program, articulating, your value to others, and then just kind of doing a little bit of a sell, like having that sort of having those experiences. I guarantee those students that were in that play and doing that, that was something they're not going to forget,
I
right? That
know
they
I
were a
saw
part of.
that first group. Um, we were at a function, and a lot, yeah, one of our former students passed away, and we were
Mm.
there. So that was a sad occasion, but I did see so many of those kids from that group, and that's what they talked
That's
about.
what they talk about. Yeah, that's an amazing sort of thing. I love it. One of the things I know you talk a lot about, and I think it's relevant to this as we're talking about, marketing and selling our programs and adapting to the circumstances that are happening, and that is, really focusing on focusing on communities essentially. And I know that's something that's actually built right in to your curriculum, right? And that
Mhm.
is one of our standards. So it's like, this is a natural, you're doing the content and you're building relationships and your program and all of that. So talk a little bit about how you deliberately address that domain or that idea of community through your curriculum and through your teaching.
So I'm I might say that the community is my favorite to see
Yeah,
in my
that's awesome,
team,
because I think it's hard. I
because
think it's the hardest for a lot of people. That's why I love that
I
you
think
say
it's my
that.
favorite to see because it talks about how you can use the language for your entertainment, your enjoyment, for your life. And I
Yeah.
think that's how I've experienced the language, that it was not only an academic thing and speaking, but also it's the one I think that's most attainable for our students. That even if our students are the ones who don't continue studying Spanish past high school, but I'm hoping that our students will get an appreciation for the community of world language speakers around them, that we've opened up their ideas to new friendships, travel, cross cultural connections, maybe a different way of viewing life. So I think that's such a valuable one, that even if they don't, there are some
Yeah.
kids who just really do not like studying another language, but if
Yeah.
there's something else that they can attain just because they were in a world language class, I think the communities one is the one that would be most beneficial and useful for them. But I always think of community. I always start off by thinking about it first in my classroom. What kind of place do I want the students to be in? And so I want my class to be fun, although I tell the kids I have no sense of humor. I find nothing funny, but I want it to be a place where I'm trying to find some enjoyment for them, that they will enjoy being there. But I also believe that, and I don't know if it's an old school Jamaican to me, I believe that you're in school, it's work, that's what you're here for. It's, that's not, we're not here to entertain you endlessly. It's a place where you're here to learn. And we just have to figure out how to make that learning enjoyable for you. And it's
Yeah.
not going to be enjoyable all the time, but for them to understand that it's a safe place where we're going to learn, you're going to use the language. There are ways that you can use the language all around you in school or outside in the community. Um, the one thing is, we rewrote the level one curriculum in New Haven, and it was based in communities. And
That's
New
great.
Haven is a city. We have multiple languages. I think in adult ed, they said they deal with over 80 languages. So you figure we're dealing those number of languages in school also. Um, so we have so many resources just in the city. And so we decided to rewrite the curriculum based on what's there. And so we had to really think carefully about what units we want to incorporate and how the city was going to help us do that. And so we start off New Haven, the world, and me, and we taught you, that's where in the unit we're talking about places in the city. So they learn the place names, they learn where you can go. I go to the mall to shop for whatever. I go to the supermarket and I buy this here. So they're still learning all the place names and the verbs and the vocabulary, but it's all about the city. And one thing that we're encouraging the students to do is to go to the places in the city where we know that the language is spoken and talk to somebody who is there. And they have this little card that says, "Hi, I'm a student at this place. I'm studying this language. Can I just talk to you?" And
Oh,
they
that's
can just have the
great.
person sign it. They can record it if the person will allow it. And then they bring it back to school and we give them a little incentive for being able to do that. And they're just so proud of themselves when they're like, I talked to a real Spanish person, or I spoke to somebody who speaks Arabic, or they're really proud, especially the younger ones. I
Yeah.
can't speak to the high schoolers, but my sixth graders, when they're just starting out, that's something that's really cool for them to do. So we do that. We try to incorporate guest speakers to come into our classrooms, or Zoom into our classrooms. In fact, I think it's easier to get a guest speaker now because they can
Yeah.
just do it
Yeah. A pandemic perk, right?
yeah, that
That's
they
great.
will come in via Zoom or Google Meet
Yeah.
and talk with their students. And we had and not only heritage language people or native speakers, because last year I did two sets of people from Yale. Those are students who, there were freshmen and sophomores who were studying Spanish at Yale. And for some, I don't know what class they were taking, but they had to talk to other people in their language. And my students who were learning Spanish we put together questions we could ask them. And these are novice students. And talk to those people at Yale and realize that, yeah, those kids make mistakes, because there's one kid said a number wrong from Yale. And my students picked up that they said the number wrong. And they said, but it doesn't matter. Did you understand what she said? And that they could be talking to a college student in a different language. And I'm in sixth grade.
Mhm.
And so we have so many places, restaurants, museums, the food trucks on Long Wharf, so many places that we can bring our students to experience the language and also branch it out to the world, So the final unit is talking about travel, but also if you are going to be in New Haven, where are the places that you could go? What would you do? And then take it out to the world. If you're going to go visit someplace, where would that be? So I really like the curriculum because it makes it more reachable for our students, because they see the pictures that I'm using are the food trucks on Long Wharf. It's the park that you play in after school. So it's making it more personal to them that, yes, I can use my language where I live. So that's what I love the most about our curriculum.
I think that is just so powerful because I think it is hard. I know for me, when I was in the classroom, you're so consumed with the communication and all the stuff that you're doing that, to me, unless it's built in, unless you have that community's standard like built into your curriculum and part of it, it kind of feels like an extra that's hard to fit in, I think. And
Mhm.
so I love the idea of just like, let's just build it in. And I don't think, for teachers out there, you don't have to redesign your entire curriculum. Maybe your district gives you a curriculum, but you could add in whenever you're doing food or, places in the community or any of those. We don't need to use generic ones. We can use the ones
Mhm.
that are actually in our
And they
community.
pay
I love that.
attention more,
Yeah.
because when I put up the first slide of just pictures, and one kid said, "Is that Hannah's dream? Hey, that's the Stop and Shop." you
Yeah.
know? And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
it's not clip art anymore. It's places they
Hmm.
know. They tuned in a lot faster.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
it has multiple benefits, right?
Mhm.
I think that's great. I think that is a super powerful, way to kind of address that community. And like we said, that building and connecting to that community then gives you opportunities later too, right? To
Mhm.
use those relationships.
But it was all Jessica's idea. Of course, she always says, "Here comes Jessica with her crazy idea. But what do you think about this?" And since we love her, we sit there, we think
You
about
just say
it,
yes.
and
What
then
you think about it, and
we
then you
think
do
about
it.
it and we talk. I mean, it took, well, the pandemic happened in between, but it took 2 years to
Yeah.
hash it out. Like, all right, so what would we want to talk about? Are we willing to give up pet units? And the
Yeah.
only thing that we agreed on right at the beginning was we will never get rid of the food units, because that's the one kids care about.
Yeah. All the
Everything else
rest.
can go. And okay, so if now we've got to figure out what we figured out what we'd keep, we figured out, well, what are things that student in level 1 should know,
Mm-hmm.
then how are we going to get it to them with these new ideas of units to do? So it took a while to figure it out, but I think, I'm enjoying it. I think it's the first full year that we're going through it, and so I'm sure there'll be revisions, but I've been enjoying it.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, thank you. So, what do you have any other tips, advice, even just commiserations with teachers right now that are kind of feeling like this is a challenge, this is hard, and I see a lot of it, on social media, and I always feel like if it gets to the point where you're putting how hard it is on Twitter, it's hard, right?
It
Like you're
becomes
at that point where
really
you need
hard.
somebody to give you some advice and some help and you're asking for some ideas, right? And I know you're in there and you're going through it. So what do
I'm
you?
going through it.
Yeah. So
So for
what do you
me,
think?
I'm a person of faith, so I pray a lot every morning. I say, God, help me to get through this
This
day.
day.
Help me to stay and do the right thing today.
Yeah.
I think we also need to evaluate what is critical for us to do. So I remember a couple of years ago, Rebecca Blue Wolf did a presentation, and I still see it in my brain, this colander. And she said, pour everything that you normally do into that colander. And some things are going to come through, and the things that remain, those would make
Yeah.
it be the critical, high impact, this is worth doing thing,
Yeah.
and let everything else go and be willing to just let it go, because I realize I can't do everything and I might be tired. I think I might be a little tired. I need to admit
Right.
that to myself. Like, as my principal said, we
Yeah.
did survival and now we're figuring out how to live. And I need to be able to do that. So, and Jessica talked about how when we were coming back last school year, of an image of a train chugging down the tracks, and she said, high school teachers are going to say these kids aren't where they're supposed to be. Well, they're not going to be, and so we need to think of it as the train's moving, and some kids are up front because some kids did
Yeah.
really well during the pandemic.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And these kids are out front at the front of the train, and there's some people in the back, but as long as we're moving everybody, then we need to count our victories where we can, but not just be stagnant. So I think, and in my brain, as I said earlier, I need to think about what are the things that I know are critical for me to do, even if I feel tired. I think it's critical that I use the language in my class and not just say, I'm tired, my brain, I'm not a heritage language person, my brain's too
Right.
tired to speak Spanish today. To make sure that that's a critical thing to do, I need to make sure I do that. So, whatever is critical, I'm going to do. And there's some things that I don't have to do. It's not going to hurt them if I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And with a community's piece, also, taking the time to plan a trip for the kids. These are things they remember.
Yeah.
Think of those things as critical ways to keep them engaged and wanting to be there. And I think finally, just I've tried my best to plan all my lessons at school and not bring my lesson plans home. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to never have to grade something at home because I really do need that break
Yeah.
because during the pandemic I felt like I was working all the time. There was no space. Parents wanting to be called at 6 o'clock at night. I'd be calling them at 6 o'clock at night. And now I just need to recover
Mm-hmm.
those boundaries and just say, I need my own life also.
Yeah.
I need to go for a walk. It's good for me to exercise. It's good for me to sleep. And if a child doesn't get his or her work graded for the next 2 days, as I said to them, it's not the end of the world. It will be graded. I'm just learning to recapture those boundaries
Yeah.
and to know that that's okay. And I have to be okay with it and they have to be okay with it. I still think I should be professional in what I do, but some things you just have to lay it down and realize it's different. The kids are different. Everything's
Yeah.
different. And learn how to make sure your head is in the right space to meet them every single day.
That's a wonderful way to end this conversation, I think. And all right, people listening, this is a highly qualified NECTFL Teacher of the Year that is going to, I'm like, she's super embarrassed now, but representing us at NECTFL. And she said, it's okay, right? You can still be a really good teacher and not do everything, right?
You
Get your
can't anymore.
priorities straight. I think that that's something that is so valuable for all of us to kind of hear, is that, that doesn't mean you're lazy, slacking, not doing a good job, right? You're prioritizing and doing what's most effective and taking care of yourself, which is extremely important.
Yeah,
So I love that. Thank you. That's
you're very
awesome.
welcome.
Best of luck to you at Actful, and I'm sure people
Thank
will say hi and wave to you, and and really touch base with you. That's a very amazing accomplishment to do, and we
thank
wish
you.
you the best of luck, and I look forward to seeing you, and thank you for sharing some of your ideas and your thoughts with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thanks.